let's get to it. Why is this not working? Now, Crimea is the hottest topic of political debate all over the world now and is becoming a hot topic in the Russian-Ukrainian war. But it hasn't always been like this, you know. I remember a different Crimea. I remember the peaceful, warm place, the territory of love. In the stream, I'd like to tell you my personal stories of Crimea's past, and I will tell you what's happened to it during the Putin's time, and I will give you my take on that. Howdy, everyone. My name is Konstantin, and welcome to Inside Russia, where usual Russia is, as usual, explained by the unusual Russian. What you will not find here is propaganda, BS or lies. What you will find is truth, common sense, and logic, and emotions too, because I'm a human being, and quite a few emotions today, because I'm going to be talking about my memories of this wonderful and tragic place. Well, first, a couple disclaimers. My opinion of what happened in Crimea has changed. You know, it'd be more precise to say that my eyes have opened, so to speak, wide opened, and I see some things and situations differently now from how I saw them 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and even a couple years ago. And I'm gonna share my, stand on everything today. Next disclaimer. This stream was inspired by one of the comments on YouTube. I gave an interview to Silicon Curtain channel and told a story when I witnessed a fuel shortage for the last time in the USSR, and it was in Crimea in 1989. And someone asked me in the comment to share more stories of how people lived there in the USSR. So I figured, it's a good idea for a stream. And there will be no live stream chat today for one simple reason. I'm still not feeling that well. Nothing major, just a little common cold. I didn't stream yesterday and no comments today, and hopefully I'll feel better tomorrow. I am actually personally connected to Crimea. Since I were little, I heard stories of Crimea this and Crimea that from my dad and many members of my family on his side. The thing is, my father was born in Crimea and his entire family is from there. My grandfather stayed in Crimea after finishing World War II, and Grandpa met his wife, my grandmother, and they had all their 5 kids there and ended up living in the East Coast near the town of Sudak for, 25 years or so. My grandfather was, that's a tough word to say, viticulturist. Viticulturist. Hope I'm saying it right. He was in charge of growing grapes for making wine in a large Soviet collective farm called Massandra. It's pretty famous. It still exists today. They actually make decent wine. He became a pretty famous viticulturist. Never heard that word before. Viticulturist. He was invited to Kiev, I believe, in the 60s to showcase the grapes that they grew. They painted a picture of him, and this big painting was on a display at Kiev's VDNH until the USSR fell apart in 1991. So my grandpa did a darn good job growing grapes, and he loved Crimea. I barely remember my grandpa as Yeah, I was 10 years old when he passed away. Not even 10 years old, before I turned 10. But there were two things I clearly remember from his stories. First, his love from Crimean land, and second, his hate of the communists. The reason the family moved away from Crimea was also my grandpa. He got upset, very upset. He was approached by the local authorities and told they were so happy about his work, they were nominating him to receive Soviet Union's highest non-military award, the Hero of Socialist Labor. A pretty big deal back then, you know. He'd be awarded the honor, but there was only one condition, one little thing, as they said. He had to become a member of the Communist Party of the USSR. No, that's what, actually, I didn't hear it from my grandpa, but that's what my dad told me later when I grew up. His dad, you know, my grandpa, he hated the commies. He, again, he told my dad of horror stories that commissars, you know, members of the Communist Party, in name of the Communist Party, committed in the World War II to regular soldiers who were not communists. He hated double-faced commies. Hated. And he was given an ultimatum. He had to join the Communist Party and get the award. And then award would evaluate him into the skies. You know, he would probably be invited to join as a senator, the local Crimean parliament, and so forth, you know. So my dad told me that my grandpa got mad, and he told them off. Do you want to give me the honor for growing the best grapes or for being a communist? What difference does it make if I'm a communist or not? Well, of course, instead of giving him the honor, they awarded it to another person, another woman, the director of another collective farm nearby, because she was the member of the Communist Party. And my grandfather got so mad, he got up and moved his entire family away from Crimea. Now, imagine that, for 25 years, that man was growing the best grapes that were selected by different, different authorities. He showcased the grapes, you know. He taught other people how to grow grapes. That's a big deal. So when he moved to Rostov, he kind of threw in the towel. He found himself a job, a security guard at a large manufacturing plant. You know, although there were other grape growing possibilities in Rostov, they grow grapes not as good as in Crimea. He didn't want to do that anymore. So he spent the remaining years of his active work life being a security guard. That's how mad he got. Well, everyone in the family always had fond of memories of Crimea. It was like an old love, you know. Gosh, even now, almost 60 years later, my aunts who are still alive, they speak very fondly of Crimea. Every time they say Crimea this, Crimea that, their eyes start sparkling, you know. It's their motherland, despite the fact that they spent 50 plus years in Rostov. I met Crimea when I was 3. Now, of course, I don't remember the trip, but I still have some photos. And since Dad was from there, we vacationed exclusively in Crimea, in one place, in his village, located in a mountainous valley between two mountains, some 6 kilometers away from the beach, and a village with a population of like 200 people. That's where he was born and raised. And boy, it is absolutely beautiful. You know, hasn't changed much since I first saw it back in the early 80s. As an analogy, if, you know, just let me give you a comparison. If you ever been to mountains of Southern California, around Santa Barbara and up north, the coast, I think that the mountains are called St. Ines Mountains or something like that. So you get the idea then. It's very similar to Crimea. Same height, same kind of mountains, not too high, but absolutely beautiful. The place is absolutely beautiful. And we vacation there, our family, my dad, my mom, and myself. We vacation there in the 80s quite a few times. I'd say every other summer, because that's when my father would get summer vacation. And let me share a few personal stories about that time. Getting there was difficult. We usually took train. I think out of all times we flew once. And for the reason unknown, because we could fly, but it was about 5 times more expensive as taking the train. And my parents simply couldn't afford it. I remember you had to buy train tickets way in advance, like 2 months in advance, because in the USSR there was a shortage of everything, including the train tickets. The plane tickets were always available because they were like 5 times more expensive. Usually it was an overnight ride through Ukraine. You would leave Rostov, would go through Taganrog, Mariupol, then Melitopol, and then into the Crimea, Ilovaisk, and then into Crimea, Simferopol is that's where we headed to, the capital of Crimea. Once we boarded the train off in Simferopol, we had a choice, either to take a taxi cab or bus. And the taxi cab was like 50 times more expensive than a bus. Well, guess what we took every time? Yeah, right, bus. Dad would write a letter to his godmother to warn her that we were coming way in advance, because there was no way of getting in touch with her, as there wasn't even one telephone in the village, believe it or not. Every time getting there, as long as we took the train and buses, was absolutely exhausting. It's getting to the train in Rostov, overnight train ride, then Simferopol to Sudak bus, then another bus, then we would get a car to take us there with a bunch of luggages. And I remember I was sitting in a train car, looking at cars passing by, dreaming of a car ride to Crimea. I was thinking, oh my gosh, it'd be so nice to own a car, and then just instead of just doing all this stuff, just hop in the car and drive. It'd be so fantastic, it was my dream. But owning a car in the USSR was a luxury, absolutely unheard of, for our family at least. The village and all the surroundings in Crimea seemed very outdated. All people in the village remembered my dad and remembered my granddad, especially my granddad, Dad, he had many classmates. They all were grown up at the time, but still, he went to school with them. No one moved away. I think my family was the only one. His family was the only one. So my dad knew everyone there, and literally everyone remembered my grandfather, and he was fondly remembered. People would just come to me, and they would look at me and say, "Oh, you are the little Samoilov, Mikhail's grandson." And they would just rub my head, and that was just crazy experience, I was pleased. I told granddad about that. Unfortunately, I don't remember his reaction. He must have been pleased too, All the villagers did was growing grapes for the collective farm. They all had daytime jobs. They pretty much worked around the clock because everyone had a little garden, bunch of fruit trees, and everyone made their own wine. Oh my goodness. Everyone threw a party to my dad's honor. So my mom and dad were literally out every single evening, every single night with people partying. They could not say no. The whole village was like one big family. Everyone knew everyone. We hiked in the mountains during daytime. It was absolutely awesome. See, I was born in Rostov-on-Don. I was raised there, and the place is flat as a table, absolutely flat. And Crimea was the first place where I saw the mountains and absolutely fell in love with the mountains, I remember if we vacated in August, I could eat grapes and peaches all I wanted. Imagine in the 80s in the USSR, we certainly didn't have peaches and grapes in the stores. We didn't have much at all. And we could buy them at the markets, at the bazaars, but they would cost an arm and a leg back then, And in Crimea, everyone grew them, and everyone was giving them away. Peach trees everywhere, and the grapes, that was so cool, Basically, people ate what they grew. The assortment of food at the tiny local store was way worse than in Rostov. And I remember for the first time I thought, wow, we have it pretty sweet in Rostov. And that's a pretty scary thought, People in Crimea in general and in the village were poorer than in Rostov. There was a certain part of Crimea, the southern coast of Crimea, where lots of Russian Soviets would come, like not lots, but myriads of them would come to vacation every single summer. And people were running small businesses, like black market taxis and black market little restaurants here and there. They would just cook something, like make pierogi or something like that, and they would just go around and sell them. And everyone was making a buck. And those people, they were well off financially. But it was a small part of Crimea. Everyone else was pretty poor, okay? Other than those Yalta and the southern coast, the whole place was like forgotten in time. Back when, when I was a teenager back then, I didn't like that. But now I think it was pretty awesome. And another story. I remember the fuel shortage. The fuel shortage is something that I haven't heard in about 35 years. Last time was in 1989 in Crimea. We usually took bus rides to the beach. There was one bus in the morning. It would travel to the beach, and I think it would bring some workers to some place near the beach. They had like a station or a wine factory or something like that. So there was one bus in the morning, and there was another bus at night, in the evening. So we get there, and it's 1989, and there were fuel shortages. There were no buses. Fuel shortages all over the country, not just in Crimea, all over. And I don't remember how we managed in Rostov, but I remember that we get there and we start looking for a bus, and people tell us, well, there's no bus today. There might be one tomorrow. Like, what? So we ended up, though of course there was a black market for gasoline, you understand that, but it was much more expensive. So we ended up catching a cab, taking a cab ride, cost an arm and a leg, but just to settle in the place. So, and the problem in that village, the gas was given to state enterprises only, to the collective farm. And nothing for very limited for public transportation. So there was no bus in the morning and there was no bus at night. So we had to walk 6 kilometers to the beach, which is about 4 miles, and then 6 kilometers back from the beach to the village. I was like, 13 years old, 12 going on 13, and I asked my dad, Why? Oh, why there's no fuel? Why why do we have to go through that? Because back then, I did not enjoy walking. Now I do. I would love to walk in the morning and at night, but, that was back then, way back then. So I asked my dad why there's no fuel, and he looked at me. I still remember his. Funny how some things just stick in your memory. I remember my dad pausing, stopping for a second, looking at me in a very sad way, and telling me, "That's commies for you, son." I still remember it's written in fire letters. It's commies for you, son. Every step I took, I thought how I couldn't stand communists. It was 1989, and the feeling is as strong today in 2023. There's another story. Have you tried canned sardines? In America, it's considered poor people's food. In the USSR, it was okay. It was actually food you could buy at the store, and moreover, it was food you could take with you to hiking trips and to the beach and would not spoil. Okay, I'll make a confession. Okay, I still eat canned sardines sometimes, once in a blue moon. Not often. One day of our time in Crimea, we went to a beach with no people. A neighbor actually gave us a ride at his old Niva. He was going someplace towards Yalta. He said, "I know this nice beach. I'm going to drop you off. It's like 10 kilometers from the village, and there's no one there. It's too far. And I'm on the way back. I'm going to pick you up." So he said, "Trust me, this place is worth to check out." So, and we did. And it was a wonderful, wonderful beach, empty. And we spent the entire day there. And I was 10 years old, and I constantly ate. Constantly, I was a growing boy. I swam and snorkeled and swam and was running all day, and boy, was I hungry. I asked my mom for food, and voila! She made sardine sandwiches, small fishes on pieces of bread. And the sardines were very unusual. They were imported from Italy. Really, really tasty. And this is the first time when I saw that you could open sardine without a special knife, this little opener, and just, roll it type of thing. It was such a novelty. It was a heavenly lunch, folks. Believe it or not, I still try sardines once in a great while. Not because I like them so much. I actually don't like sardines, but because I have that day's memory. I have that day lunch memory. I remember those sardines. I remember us at the beach, and I remember how they tasted so darn good. Another story. Every time we went to Simferopol, every time we went to Crimea, we went to Simferopol. Simferopol is a fairly big town, 500,000 people, right in the middle of Crimea. It's away from the sea, not too far, but away. And it's a capital of Crimea. And that's where my aunt moved to. She graduated from a university, and she ended up staying at Simferopol. That's my father's sister. She still lives there, So she has two sons, my cousins, and they have families, and big family we have here. So every time we went to Crimea, we went to visit them, right? And I remember they threw a party every time we came, and there was a celebration, so to speak, feast. And Dad would also disappear for half of the day. And I remember he would come back with a bag, paper bag of food, and two particular things he would bring. One was a bottle of cognac for him and, his, is it brother-in-law, his sister's husband. And it was a large cake for all of us. And the cake was absolutely incredible. It was called Tavrida. It was a specialty cake made by that one cake factory in Simferopol. And still to this day, I have not had a better cake, believe it or not. That was the tastiest thing I've ever had. And every time, the cake was expensive, so every time he paid an arm and a leg for that, but that was so worth it. Next time I came to Simferopol after a long time, I think it was 2005, I was looking for the cake, I couldn't find it. Recipe was gone, the factory was gone, everything's changed. So you see, I have incredible memories from my childhood in Crimea. What an incredible place and what an incredible time. But make no mistake, even in the 80s, Crimea was Ukrainian. It was absolutely clear. All signs were doubled in Russian and Ukrainian. And I heard people speaking Ukrainian on the beach everywhere, so much. Like 60-40. 60% they spoke Russian and 40% they spoke Ukrainian. It was very unusual for me. That's why I remembered, because anywhere in the USSR, until then, I had not heard a different language other than Russian. So Ukraine was present. Ukraine was seen in Crimea in the 80s. I am a witness. And then 1991 came, and the USSR fell apart, and we started struggling. We as a family, everyone around us started struggling. We were making a transition from one system to another one, from communism to capitalism, and we simply stopped vacationing. In the 90s, I don't remember one vacation we took as a family, And Crimea definitely was forgotten. I mean, we remembered the family. I think they even came to visit us in the 90s once from Crimea, but we did not go to Crimea anymore. Then I left for the USA. I spent there so many years, returned, and that became a different life, And I returned to Crimea in 2005. After returning to Russia, I worked for an international company, energy company, with some facilities, some assets in Ukraine. As company's chief business development officer, I was in charge of overseeing a few manufacturing plants, including a manufacturing plant in Zaporozhye, Ukraine. And I traveled there quite often. And one day, one trip, I had a couple days to spare. I decided to take a ride to Crimea first, to see the family. It's about, I think, 4 or 5 hour drive from Zaporozhye straight south to Crimea. It was pretty cool drive. I had my driver took me there, and I dropped out of the blue after not seeing my family for 15 years, and they were absolutely happy, ecstatic to see me. I spent a couple days with them, and I flew to Moscow, so it was pretty cool. Another time I visited Crimea was in 2007. I was invited to a large party in the city of Alushta on the seaside, on the seacoast, that was organized by one of our clients, big clients. This big concert and celebration, Then later, I drove from Rostov to Crimea through Mariupol, Melitopol, quite a few times. I took my dad to see the family and see his birthplace. I remember we went through Mariupol every time. We were, we were, how do I say that? Impressed impressed to see how the vibrant and growing and powerful the city was, you know. Of course, it was built around Azovstal, that's huge steel factory. And it was absolutely fantastic road trip, just me and my dad, around 6 hours of driving, and driving was nice. The roads were okay, better on the Russian side, worse on the Ukrainian side, but still okay, you know, not too bad. The scenery in Ukraine was absolutely breathtaking. Then I went again and again a couple times by myself, drove, and I think the last time we went with my wife in 2013, 1 year before Russia annexed Crimea. So we drove all around Peninsula, and it was just a good time, you know. The main purpose for me visiting Crimea was always the family. Crimea is a beautiful place, but it never was the best value to have vacation there. And I mean, after the USSR. When it was the USSR, we kind of had no choice, you know, we had to go. It was more expensive than an all-inclusive trip to Turkey or Greece if you were to choose from the few expensive hotels there. See, they were few expensive, super expensive hotels. Like the one in Alushta. Imagine, city of Alushta is a, you know, like a resort town. And there's a long public beach, and there's a private hotel on the beach. And the hotel is fenced off, and it's perfect inside. Everything is perfect. You know, the personnel is perfect. It's nice. It's clean. It's beautiful. It's like, you know, you are there, and you have a feeling that you're in Nice, France, someplace, you know. And then you step outside, and there's a bunch of trash everywhere, tons of people, you know, dirty restaurants and so forth. So there's a huge difference. The thing is, to stay inside of that beautiful hotel, you had to pay 1,000 euro per night. That's 2007. That was way, way expensive. I mean, of course, it was easier to fly to Turkey or Greece or, I don't know, Italy, anywhere. Not the price of Crimea. Only very rich people stayed there. It's basically those hotels were made for them. Or you could go real cheap in Crimea. And a lot of people would drive from Russia, from Ukraine, and they would stay there inside their cars. They would get a tent up, and they would bring their own food. So it was incredibly cheap. So either incredibly expensive, incredibly cheap. And I was falling somewhere in the middle. Okay, I didn't have that much money to spend. So I always traveled other places like Turkey or Egypt if it was not in the summertime, to have nice vacation. So, but when I went to Crimea, my primary goal was family. It was all around family first, and then if I had some time, I would go and, you know, spend some time at the sea and so forth. So I went to see my aunt, again, my cousins, their families. Until 2014, I had a feeling that Crimea was sort of unattended, sort of forgotten. I traveled all around Ukraine. Gosh, I lived in Ukraine for about a year, and the cities like Odessa, Kiev, Donetsk, Kharkov, they were quickly growing. They were getting renovated, and so much money were being invested, pumped into those cities. In Crimea, nothing was going on there. Was like everyone forgotten about Crimea, you know. Nothing, virtually nothing had changed since I visited in the 80s. Only a few things, super expensive houses and super expensive hotels, but very few of them were built by mostly very, very rich Ukrainians, the oligarchs, you know. It was like time traveling back into the USSR. And this 2014 came. Remember that as if it was yesterday, you know. February, Russia annexed Ukraine. There's popular opinion and knowledge that it happened in March, early March, but no. Russia started annexing Crimea in February. It was not a spontaneous move, but it had been planned. Remember I told you that I see lots of things differently. My eyes have been opened on many things. Well, Russia annexed Crimea, you know the story. And I made a big mistake. I felt indifferent about it. It was clear that Russia was breaking international law, but somehow it didn't click inside. I still regret for not being vocal enough, not standing up, not protesting, not doing anything about it, you know. It's my mistake as a citizen of Russian Federation. That's my fault. And, you know, if any Ukrainian watching this now, you can take a rock and throw it into me, and I deserve it. You know, guilty as charged. And I'm being my own judge here. Not like I welcomed Crimea into Russia that much, but I definitely didn't. I was more of indifferent. Now, there were some people in Crimea who welcomed Russian annexation and who were opposing it. And I can't tell you how many of each group, as I did not witness the process of annexation. What happened after? First of all, right after the annexation, lots of tragedies happened that no one is talking about. A lot of people who opposed the annexation, they moved out of Crimea. The Ukrainians, they went back to, the outside Crimea, to Ukraine. There were many tragedies because the families were breaking up. I personally know a couple families that, husband was Ukrainian, wife was Russian, husband opposed, wife welcomed the annexation, they got divorced. I know that some people still don't speak to each other, who were friends. And I can't tell you how many, because I don't think anyone has statistics, but I have a feeling that quite a few. And that was the first tragedy, okay? What happened after? Well, both Ukrainians and Russians, Crimean Ukrainians were lied to. That's what happened. Russians were sold this patriotic soup of how Crimea returned home, how it was historical justification, etc., And the Crimean Ukrainians were promised paradise, no less than paradise. And at this point, it's becoming clear for everyone. I'm pretty sure of it now, okay? I look at things much differently now, and I'm pretty sure that Putin annexed Crimea with 4 purposes in mind. First, to raise his fallen domestic approval rating. Second, to show the world his greatness, how he can steal land from neighbors and get away with it, and no one does anything. So, to build up his macho image in the world. Third, to steal money. And the fourth, to create a bridgehead to invade Ukraine. What happened after the annexation was pretty unbelievable. It's actually Sergei Aksionov, he was appointed by the head of Crimea, the professional Ukrainian politician. He lived in Ukraine all his life until it had been annexed. It was annexed by Russia. So he was the professional Ukrainian politician. He betrayed Ukraine and he turned to Russia. And he helped to annex Crimea, and he was paid by, Putin made him the head of Crimea. And right after the annexation, money started getting pumped into Crimea. And that's how everyone who stayed in Crimea, they were excited about that. Whoa, look how much money we're getting now. Compared to Ukraine, look, they're just They announced so many projects and so forth. And I heard the promises that of the officials that Crimea would blossom. And this is what really happened after. They have been two ways of financing Crimea. First is the federal level, and the second is local. Federal level, all large facilities and infrastructure projects, such as Crimean Bridge, the new airport, the highway from the Crimean Bridge to the airport and further to Sevastopol, large hospitals. There's, I think, the university and a large thermal power plant where they stole Siemens turbines to, by the way. Was a huge scandal. And all those projects, they were financed on federal level. In other words, Crimeans did not see those money. The money was allocated in Moscow, the Kremlin, basically, at the Ministry of Finance, and was given to general contractors. And of course, who general contractors were? Vladimir Putin's friends, best friends. They were given this big, fat contracts, And the second way of financing, local, local roads, education, healthcare, local financing, so to speak. So the money came to Crimea, and the Crimeans had to redistribute it. Guess what happened? Very little has been done. Everything, mostly everything, have been stolen. People who live in Crimea, have been growing more and more angry. Like, you promised us to give us so much, but you can't even give us like normal water sewage plants, for how many years we have to wait for them and things like that, So basically, Crimea became, for Russian government, it became a black hole of finances, a black hole where money was going to and no one knew where it was disappearing, okay? And of course, the officials, they were controlling that black hole and basically a way of stealing. And another thing that happened overwhelmingly all over Crimea was, it's insane how they just lied to us, And everyone, including myself, I bought it. When I remember when the annexation was, there were a few people, they were traveling around the coastal Crimea, and there were tons of, beach is the public property in Russia. There's a law that it cannot be a private property. Same in Ukraine. But if you're rich and powerful, and someone in the government, both in Russia and in Ukraine, you can just take a little bit of beach and fence it off. And if there are many rich and powerful people come to Crimea, there are many fences. That's how it works. Same works in Russia, So when Russian government came in, the first thing they started doing, publicly cutting off the fences, saying, look, Crimean beaches are for the Crimeans now, for the regular people, not just for the rich and powerful. They did it for a year, and then they started installing their own fences. So much property has been stolen from Ukrainians, from rightful owners. Large hotels, large medical clinics, large businesses. This world-famous wine-making business called Massandra, where my grandpa used to work. It used to belong to Ukrainian government, by the way, and Russians came in and they nationalized it. At first it went to I think the office of the president property, and then of course it was privatized, sold to some guy. Okay, and most wine-making companies, Novy Svet, Inkerman, same thing. Lots of land. They would buy an old hotel. They wouldn't buy. They would just, claim it's been nationalized from a rightful owner, from a Ukrainian owner, and now it belongs to Crimean government. And then somehow the documents would be re-registered onto a company or a person, And basically Putin gave Crimea to his buddies, his friends, for the taking. And everyone claimed a good fat piece of Crimea, business land, location, and either built houses or just started using existing houses and so forth. And that's a pretty sad story. Okay, if you go to Crimea now, then you will find more areas of beaches fenced off. So the Russian politicians have houses there, right, on the beaches or with access to the beaches and so forth, Russian government did not deliver on anything it promised. I mean, it's not the hugest problem. The biggest problem is that it annexed the Crimea itself, and it's, broke the international law. But on top, it didn't do anything it promised. It only built large projects. The bridge, the highway, the airport. But those projects cost so much to the Russian taxpayers. For example, the Crimean bridge was estimated when they started constructing it to be at 70 billion rubles. And after it was finished, the cost grew to 220 plus billion Russian rubles. Imagine how much money was stolen there. And that's the taxpayers, all the taxpayers who paid for it. Anyway, Putin promised the Crimeans security and prosperity, and he didn't deliver on both. Prosperity, more and more people in Crimea are becoming angrier and angrier because, they realize they've been lied to. I wonder how they would vote if they knew what was to come to Crimea and if they returned back into 2014. There's definitely no prosperity and there's definitely no security. Security. I mean, what security we're talking about? Crimea gets bombed every single day, every single night. Ukrainian drones fly and attack the Black Sea Fleet to the point where most of the Black Sea Fleet has been transferred to Novorossiysk, and they're thinking of transferring it down further to Abkhazia. The missile defense systems work in Crimea every single night. That is the safety and security that Putin promised, Crimea was always a peaceful land, and it was Ukrainian. I mean, it was just a crazy idea to think that anyone could come and start a war there. And now the Crimea became the key point in the war between Russia and Ukraine, and most likely it's become the target of Ukrainian army for the future. Russia has screwed up a big deal by taking Crimea, annexing it, breaking international law, and basically running it in the way Russia is run. So Crimea has become Russia in terms of how Russian authorities have been running it, not by law, but in reality what's going on there. There's KGB in Crimea, Russian KGB. There's very few freedoms, Crimean Tatars get arrested. can't say anything, you can't protest, just like in Russia, okay? And I think that's a tragedy. So, folks, this is my personal story of Crimea. Again, I feel I regret a lot. I regret that I did not do anything when in 2014 when Crimea was actually being annexed. I remember that I did not protest. I was not vocal. But what's done is done. I'm trying to do my part now, you know. Thank you so much. That has been my message today. Hope you learned a thing or two about Crimea. Like I said, there would be no live stream chat. I'm still not feeling myself. But I'd like to invite you to a prayer, to pray, and including Crimea, to pray for Crimea and people who live there. And, I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully with a live stream chat on and with another message. Thank you. Dear Lord Jesus Christ, thank you so much for giving us this day. Thank you for giving us this life. Thank you for putting food on our tables, giving roofs over our heads. Thank you for surrounding us with people who we love and who love us. Thank you for everything. And dear Lord, please give us wisdom to raise our children in a way that when they grow up and become adults, they will make this place a better world. And give us wisdom to keep the skies above our children's heads peaceful. For now, please keep our children healthy and safe. Dear Lord, please help to stop stop the bloodshed in Ukraine. Reach out and touch the hearts and souls of those who can make it happen, who are responsible and capable. Please do everything that's necessary to be done for them to wake up and stop the bloodshed. Please help every Ukrainian who has been affected by the war. Please answer their prayers and make their wishes come true. Also, I'm asking for Israel, people of Israel who are suffering this terrible tragedy right now, attacking them, innocent ones. Please help them. Do not forget about them, and please send them angels. Dear Lord, please help my country, Russia. Assemble the strongest army of your strongest angels with sharpest swords, led by Saint Michael, and send it like a heavenly avalanche onto this earth to get rid of the demons that have hijacked my country, Russia. Have Russia run by the angels. Have angels make it peaceful, loving, loved, respecting, and respected. Please help everyone who is traveling. Send them safe travels, who are running away from danger. Send help their way. Help those who are seeking asylum and those who are in physical danger, especially families. Dear Lord, please help everyone who is being attacked in Ukraine and in Israel right now. Protect them and send angels for protection. Dear Lord, please don't forget all the single mothers who are bringing up their children and struggling to make ends meet. Please help all the hungry, the sick, the homeless, the jobless, the addicted, the ones who are betrayed, the ones who are not feeling well about themselves, the stressed and depressed people, the ones who are not feeling well about their lives. Please fill their hearts with love and send them warmth of your love, surround them in the warmth of your love so they are feeling better and have hope to have a good life, so they stand up from their knees, stand tall, and have life, warm up for them. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing us together into this community. Thank you for allowing us to pray. Thank you for everyone who's praying with me or simply watching us pray. Everyone, please answer everyone's dream and make everyone's wish come true. Thank you so much, dear Lord. I'd like to ask you for all the people who are on my list. I would like to ask you to help all the people who are in trouble or struggling in Crimea, in Ukraine, and in Russia for that matter, in Israel, and in all countries where there's evil, attacking the good people. Please help everyone, and help everyone who, every name on my list, you know who they are better than I do, and you know what they need, what kind of help they need better than I do. Please help them. Thank you so much, dear Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you, friends. Almost made it stream without coughing. Thank you. I would like to tell you that you're absolutely awesome and you rock. And I will see you tomorrow. Hopefully live stream chat will be on. And before I sign off, I invite everyone to say the usual. Please say it out loud along with me. As loud as you can. Carthago delende est.